Hello, I am your host, Kathy Chester, and welcome to the Move It or Lose It podcast, a podcast about all things that move the mind, body, and soul. The Move It or Lose It podcast is for information, awareness, and inspirational purposes only. I am not a doctor, and I don't even play one on TV, so please consult your doctor before making any medical decisions. The views expressed by advertisers, guests, or contributors are their opinions and not necessarily the views of the Move It or Lose It podcast. Hello, welcome to another episode of Move It or Lose It. And today I'm very excited. You all know who follow Move It or Lose It. Any company that is doing something for our stroke victims or autoimmune victims that are able to do something that makes our life easier. I always love to interview them. So today I have Dr. Tyler Susko, right? Said it right?
That's right. Perfect. Thanks,
Yay.
Kathy.
So I have been so excited about your product, what you've come up with, and just your vision and what you're doing and getting in contact with you. I'm so excited, and I want you just to talk about your vision and
Sure.
the shoe, which I've been talking to everybody about. I had a big women's support group, and I was like, have
Oh.
you seen these? You got to get on right now and see these shoes.
Well, thank
So
you.
yeah, I'm really excited. And as I told you before, when we were talking before we started,
Mhm.
that foot problems are such a big issue.
Mm.
And when I'm working with stroke victims or MS, patients like myself, or
Yeah.
even rheumatoid, it's like, or diabetes, it's such a big thing. And it's like, nobody ever, doctors look at us like we're crazy. We're
Mm.
like, no, we actually, our feet hurt. Can you help?
Mm.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
talk to us about how you got started for those of you who
Yeah.
don't know, for
Of
those people who
course.
don't know.
Sure. Sure. Well, thanks again for having me. Yeah. So my journey, I guess we go all the way back. It started when I was in high school and realized there was a population that had movement difficulties or disabilities that at the time I didn't know how to help. But as my career kind of grew, I became an engineer, and I realized that I had a skill set that I could use for, well, just about anything to
Yeah.
create products. And I got into industry after I was an undergraduate designing power tools and all-terrain vehicles and golf carts for a company called Ingersoll Rand, which was an awesome job. But at the end of the day, I wanted something that I was more directly
Yeah.
helping people.
Yeah.
So then I went to do my PhD, and I went to
Mhm.
MIT, and I spent 5 years there doing a PhD. And the cool thing is that there was a lab there that was doing specifically what I was interested in, which was at the time stroke rehab, any neuro
Uh,
rehab, but
right.
specifically with robots. So at
Hmm.
the time,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh, I want to get into robotics. That sounds awesome. So I got into a lab that really pioneered the first robots that interface with people
Hmm.
with stroke to
Right.
recover from the stroke. Um,
Yeah.
so my advisor was the guy that I think he developed the first one of these in the 80s, and it took 30
Yeah.
years for this method to become approved by the American Heart
Right.
Association,
Crazy, but
which
yeah.
was crazy for that amount of time and work that
Yeah.
he had put into it. But there was a hole in gait therapy for stroke, specifically
Mhm.
with robots at the time.
Right.
There are devices out there. There are exoskeletons that people can walk
Mhm.
in that allow you even to walk over ground.
Mhm.
Exobionics is a company that spun out of Berkeley that does
Mhm.
just that. They do a bunch of exoskeletons, pretty cool stuff. There's other companies that do treadmill-based machines or even kind of like elliptical trainers
Mhm.
for this type of thing. But a lot of the literature was suggesting that um, these devices didn't necessarily outperform
Mhm.
human interventions, body weight
Right.
supported treadmill therapy, these kind of things.
Mhm.
So we started to just say, okay, well, what could be the problem there? And one of the things that we learned from upper extremity robots was the
Mhm.
fact that you have to allow intention to happen and free motion to
Mhm.
happen for that person to complete the neural circuitry. So you're trying
Right.
to build this neural circuitry back together.
Right.
Um, and if you just have somebody close their eyes and you move them around, nothing happens.
Right.
People have to
Right.
be able to move to strengthen these
Yes.
neural connections.
Yes.
So we were trying to figure out what's the way that we can help people walk in the least disruptive method possible. And
Right.
what we came up with was, well, we'll have people walk on a treadmill, but anytime
Mhm.
if there's somebody that suffers with foot drop, which is
Right.
big problem with the stroke community,
Yeah.
with the MS community, with the cerebral palsy community.
Right. Right.
They have trouble clearing the floor when they're coming
Right.
forward for that next step. So what we
Yes.
did is we built a treadmill that could drop out of the
Mm-hmm.
way on one side. So there was
Right.
two treadmills, one that was for your right foot, one that was for your left foot. And
Right.
every time you went to take that step forward, the treadmill
Uh-huh.
would drop out of the way. We get rid of the ground. And then when
And
the
that's
foot
the
came
split
back,
one.
it was a split treadmill, exactly.
Okay.
Split
Very cool.
treadmill. We called
Yeah.
it the Skywalker if anyone wanted to look it up. But
I just thought
this,
you named it after Star Wars. I was excited
you
about
know,
that.
I think
I'm just a
that
Star
the
Wars
name
nerd.
predated me. I got there and there was a name or a concept that somebody had come up with, and it wasn't really a functional machine.
Uh-huh.
So I had redeveloped the whole thing to be actually functional and do what it needed to do. So we found that, removing the floor, I call it the floor constraint. It's a
Uh-huh.
constraint in motion because it exists there and you don't want it to exist. You want to be able to move your
Right.
foot forward, but the floor is
Correct.
there. So
Yes.
but you need the floor when you
Yeah.
stand, right? We can't
Yeah.
stand and we can't push off and we can't
Right.
move forward without the floor, but it gets to be
Right.
a problem when you're trying to move that foot forward. So this
Exactly.
treadmill was just dropping every time somebody took a step. So you can imagine these big treadmill tracks, and every second the thing is going down, up, down, up, down, up,
Right.
down, up. And there was a vision system that was looking at the leg to know exactly where it was. And as soon as the person was making that step, we had an algorithm, a computer algorithm that was
Yeah.
anticipating when they were about to make the step. As soon as they were about
Wow.
to make the step, the track dropped away, the foot swing forward like a pendulum,
Uh-huh.
nice and easy, and then it came in contact with the track to make another step. So we ran
Wow.
what we called a feasibility study at MIT.
So
We had,
this was like a
yeah,
study, like who was on your team? Did you have a team of scientists, or who was doing this with you?
yeah, so it was pretty much just me and my advisor at the time.
Wow.
So
Wow.
my advisor, like I said, that he had done this for 30, 35 years.
Mhm.
At that point, he was the pioneer in this area.
Okay.
So he had
Yeah.
seen everything. He put me in touch with medical collaborators. I met with chief medical officers of hospitals. I tested the machines that were currently on the market
Hmm.
at Spalding Rehab Hospital, which is in
Yeah.
Boston.
Hmm.
A really nice researcher let me actually get on
Yeah.
the machine and had me do an
Oh,
hour-long
cool.
training on that machine. So I saw
Yeah.
all of that. And we had a physical therapist come and we did a feasibility study
Hmm.
and do assessments on the people that joined our study before and
Right.
after. Everything was ethics board approved and stuff. But
Hmm.
effectively, the MIT way is kind of you do your work by yourself most of the
Yes.
time, and you have an advisor
Yeah.
that knows what they're doing. But so I
Yeah.
developed this whole machine, and we did a feasibility study with 3 people over 40 sessions. So each person did
Okay.
12 to 16 sessions for a 1 month period to
Okay.
see what happens when we put people on
Right.
this type of a machine. And we were
Yeah.
looking for rehabilitation outcomes.
Hmm.
And I had 2 people with cerebral palsy, one with stroke in that study. That was it.
Okay.
And we're just, we did find some interesting findings afterwards, specifically with rhythmicity of walking, how
Say
rhythmic
that
people
3 times
are. So yeah,
fast.
I know, right? Symmetry. There was some gait speed improvements. There was balance improvements. There was a lot of, and this was just one mode of a
Right.
machine. I won't go any further into that machine, but
But still
um,
very neat.
it was really neat. But the thing that hit me the most after the study was
Hmm.
just the comment from one participant in the study who eventually ended up being my friend. And there's a long story there, but she said,
Uh-huh.
it's just so easy to walk without having to worry about catching my toe every time I take a step. And for her,
Yeah.
it was my realization was, and she had cerebral palsy, and my
Hmm.
realization was these people are having a hard time mentally with walking
Yeah.
because it's
Yes.
always the fear of every step is going to be a trip.
Yes.
And when you're walking out in the community, it's don't trip.
Yeah.
There's stigma associated with the way people are walking. There's
Right.
also people are self-conscious because they don't want to fall in front of others.
Uneven ground.
Uneven ground,
Yeah.
it becomes this thing. And she said, it's so easy to
Right.
walk. I can walk on this and not worry anymore. That's
Yeah.
great. And she
It
said,
is. It's a scary thing of that I deal with a lot with clients is that, like we talked about, it's the fear of the floor, of the ground.
yeah,
And so a lot of that is teaching them to come up from the ground because it is such a fear when you can't walk properly is what'll happen. What do I
right,
do?
right,
And what if I'm alone and I'm on the ground and I can't do this?
right,
So that's very wise that
right,
you
right.
caught that.
Absolutely. And she said she just said to me in passing, like kind of as a joke, oh man, it feels so good walking on that. I wish I could just take it with me when I walked outside. And I said,
Hmm.
well, why don't we work on that? And she's like, you would say that. And we're like, well, we'll try it. So then I at that point I graduated from MIT and I moved
Uh-huh.
to UC Santa Barbara, where I
Okay.
currently work. And at that point, that participant that was in our study also moved to Santa Barbara. It was just this weird happening of serendipity, right? We both
Hmm.
were moving here. She was the one who was like, maybe you could do this for me outside. I said, well, why don't we try?
Uh-huh.
So she started working with my students and we started to build
Uh-huh.
stuff. So we started to do a robotic shoe, which makes sense because
Okay.
we started with robots, but robotic
Right.
shoes were just such a bad idea. Such a
Yeah.
bad idea.
I mean, I'm sure they were super sexy looking too.
Oh, they're terrible. Exactly. Actually, you bring up the best
Right.
point, right? That people do not want to look like the Terminator or RoboCop. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
it's like as an engineer, yeah, that's cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, generally nobody wants that. So
Right. Right.
so after a couple of years or about a year of trying, we decided that this is a bad idea completely.
Hmm.
The weight alone of putting stuff and motors and batteries
Right.
underneath your foot is
Yeah.
terrible. And where do you put that stuff? There's always a
Right.
problem when you
Right.
develop these devices is if you have weight and there's robots, like where do you put
Right.
it? Um,
Exactly.
and there's not a really great place in the body to put it, like a fanny pack,
Right.
maybe. I'm sure people
Right.
love that too. So,
For sure. Yeah.
so we're there. We're like, okay, well, then I started working with more students at UCSB. We started
Um,
doing projects on, okay, how do we turn this feeling into a shoe that we call passive, meaning there is no
right.
motors, no batteries, no
Right.
software to deal with. And we came up with more and more prototypes and concepts. And after a year of doing that with a group of senior students, one of the students decided she wanted to take this into her master's. So she did a master's, and we did an IRB, which is a ethics board approved study
Hmm.
with 5 people using a passive shoe, which we called
Uh-huh.
the Cadence shoe at the time. With a C that time. We spell our company with an S, Cadence with an S. But at that time, it was Cadence shoe,
Uh-huh.
and we were cutting holes in thick soled shoes, and we were putting
Okay.
in elements that were low friction with pieces of foam behind them that would spring them back out. So
Right.
effectively what we were calling this was a variable friction shoe. It was low
Okay.
friction if people accidentally hit the floor, and it was high friction when they pushed down on it with their weight, because those little nubs of low friction material would get pressed up into the shoe and you would get the rubber
Wow.
back. And
Right.
so we were like, okay, this, in our opinions at the time, and still probably,
Right.
that this most closely approximated what I was able to do at
Hmm.
MIT with $1 million machine into something that could
Right.
presumably be a $200 shoe. And so we're saying,
Right.
okay, the impact of that is probably much greater. As engineers, we want to design the most complicated things. This is like the
Right.
thing.
Right.
That's like my main job at
I happen to know a
UCSB
few of
is,
you. Yeah.
yeah,
So
like
I
my
know a
main
few of you guys. So yeah.
my main job at UCSB is effectively getting engineers to think as simple as possible, because
Yeah. Good
everybody
luck with
wants to
that.
build, you know,
Good luck.
everybody wants to design the next, like,
Yeah.
machine
Most
that has
complicated. Right.
27 different gear trains inside of it. And you're like,
Sure.
oh, okay, let's do it with one.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. And for us, we wouldn't know what to do with
Mhm.
that. We're
Yes,
just
no,
like,
no.
what do
What
we do with
is
that?
this? What is this?
Cognitively, we'd be like, I don't know what to do.
Too much
So
complexity. So,
yeah.
it's this is always, and if you talk to any of my students here, they'd all say the same thing. My message to everybody is always the same. It's just keep it as simple as possible, and the
Yeah.
simplest solution you can possibly come up with wins. That's it.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Um, so getting back into the shoes, so we were cutting these holes in these shoes, and we ran a 5-person pilot study at UCSB that was ethics board approved. When you go through the ethics board, it's IRB,
Uh,
takes years. So we
yeah.
did
Yeah, I'm
we
sure.
did that with 5 people. We had a physical
Mm.
therapist come to
Uh-huh.
UCSB. We did this in collaboration with our local hospital here, which is called Cottage
Mm.
Hospital. There's a research grant. It was a very small amount, but
Uh,
it gave us access to the therapist and the therapist
sure.
time, so they could come to campus. So we had 5 people walk with these variable friction shoes, again, cutting holes in them, and
Sure.
found that, wow, we saw 3 out of the 5 people walked 20 to 60% faster in these shoes
Wow.
in 2 minutes with no instructions. So we didn't know what
Wow.
we were doing with it at that time. We just
Yeah.
did this and gave it
Yeah.
to people. The therapist came. They got 2 minutes to feel acclimated. We had a fall support harness because we didn't know what was going to
Yeah.
happen at that point.
Right.
And we just had them walk around our lab, and then we had them go outside the lab, and there was a 10-meter walk test set up. And we said, okay, so
Yeah.
walk 10 meters, go forward, backward, forward. with your shoes, and then we switched, which order it was in, and
Hmm.
then walk in it with our shoes, and then come back into the lab, and let's look at your gait mechanics. So we had cameras set
Right.
up, 6 cameras looking at the legs with a whole bunch of infrared markers, so we could tell what was going on with the foot,
Sure.
your shin and the upper leg, and we
Yeah.
could see the motions. And what we found is the people that were improving came in with a circumduction type gait, where they're flipping their
Okay.
leg out to the side to get
Yeah.
that step
Yeah.
because they're trying to avoid the
Yeah.
floor.
Sure.
They're trying to
Absolutely.
avoid
Yeah.
this. And these
I see it all the time. That's
the
the
gait
one thing I'm
pattern,
always trying
yeah.
to
Uh,
yes.
Absolutely. And you think about gait patterns. Gait
Yeah.
patterns, when they're abnormal, are
Uh-huh.
an adaptation that the body makes based on the
Yes.
constraints around its body. That's it.
Exactly.
So if anybody hurts their ankle or hurts their knee,
Hmm.
they'll start limping. They limp because
Right.
it's the most effective way to move
Right.
forward with maybe less pain. There's something that's being optimized there. It's either pain
Exactly.
or it's easier to move that way. So your body actually is
Right.
very quick at adapting to new
Right.
surroundings, which is interesting.
Yes.
So the people that improved, we looked at their gait, what's happening. So
Hmm.
in that 2 minutes, their body had figured out a new pattern where they weren't circumducting as much anymore. The reductions
Right.
in that angle started to go down by like 60%. And people
Yeah.
started just moving forward and relying on
I
this
love
low
that.
friction surface to move forward. So there was more
Yeah.
knee flexion, there was more hip
Yeah.
flexion. We're seeing, okay, well, something's happening here, and we kind of have an idea why, but there's 5 people there. So
Right.
there's
Right.
we can't
Right.
say too much. This is a pilot study.
Right.
So we published that work. It was in the Engineering, Medicine, and Biology conference. It was in Munich that year in Germany.
Uh-huh.
And we published that work, and that's in 2019. So
Uh-huh.
after that, we said, okay, this looks like it might be something that's going to work. So we got another grant called a Seed Tech grant from
Okay.
the California Nanosystems Institute, which was a
How
grant
long
that
does it
was
take to get these grants? Like forever?
it depends on what you apply for, but
Okay.
for the first one with Cottage Hospital was fairly quick,
Uh-huh.
maybe 6 months.
Okay.
And then the second one was pretty quick too, maybe 3 or 4
Okay.
months, maybe six, to get this next grant, which was effectively to take something you've done in the lab and now
Hmm.
let's spin it out in the world. So it was
Okay.
a seed technology grant,
Right.
$50,000 to do what you can to get this technology now moved
Uh-huh.
out. We couldn't use what we had developed in the lab for out of the lab. It was only made for hard
Okay.
surfaces because they were little like plastic nubs that would get caught in every crack and crevice that you
Gotcha.
walk down the
Right.
street with. You can't use that.
Sure.
So the next step was to get it to a manufacturable
Hmm.
thing. So we started to explore, and mind you, in between all of this, there was probably 30 to 40 attempts to get this right. It took a long time.
I
And
am
so
sure.
yeah, it's just you experiment with something, you try it, something's wrong, you try something else.
Right.
And so we got to the point with the Seed Tech grant where we were able to produce 26 pairs of shoes. We had 3 iterations with a factory that was making
Okay.
shoes. So they knew how to make shoes, and we could iterate. So the first one was like a
Hmm.
3D printed, what we called it, a puck on the front that was
Uh,
kind of like the shape of a ski, the front edge of a ski.
okay.
We wanted it to be able to, if it hit that crack, that 1/4 inch crack or that nub or that
Hmm.
uneven concrete or pavers, that it would hit it and then get over it. So we
Right.
made it so it's like a ski. So you hit that and it goes over.
Right.
And we wanted to make sure, it's not going to get caught in cracks. And um, so after that kind of round of development, which took a couple of years, I think.
Yeah,
So
I'm
when you go to
sure.
the shoe factory, it's not like what we were doing here, which was cutting to shoes.
Right.
If I cut into a shoe, I can make a new prototype in an hour.
Right.
If you go to the factory, it takes 3 months, and then you get
Right.
it back,
Right.
and then you mess with it, and then you ask for something else, and it gets into a
Sure.
queue, and 3 months later you have another one, and so this takes
Sure.
like a year. And so we got to a point where it was good. We said, okay, let's exhaust all the money we have left in that grant. Let's get as many pairs of shoes as we can, and that'll be the output of the
Sure.
grant. We also spent some money on things like a force plate to assess forces while people were walking with the shoes, which we're still
Hmm.
doing. Um, and so, okay, so at that point, we had 26 pairs of shoes, and
So the
then I
26
started.
pairs of shoes, I'm
Mhm.
curious, so they were for different issues. So if you had foot drop or you had like I'm thinking of the clients that
Mhm.
like do the, start do this and then the
Yeah.
clients that just roll to the side,
Yep. Yep.
like, doing that. So were you having to come up with one shoe for all or different
Mm.
shoes
It was
for
one
each?
shoe for that
Okay.
needed to work for everybody. So
Okay.
once you get in the manufacturing phase, each mold is very expensive. So
Hmm.
that money essentially went to one size, one mold, one shoe. and now we can
Okay.
make 26 of them. That's
Okay.
essentially how it works.
Yeah.
So we got these 26, but your point's a good one. Like, who actually is going to benefit from
Right.
this? And that at this time, we didn't really know. We had
Right.
interactions in our pilot study at UCSB. We did have two people with MS. We had
Uh,
people with brain tumors. We had cerebral
uh,
palsy in that study. The first
right.
one, we had cerebral palsy and stroke. Um, and so we didn't know, but I said, okay, now that we have these shoes, we got 26 pairs. They
Right.
were all size 9 men's. That was all we had. And we contracted a shoe designer in that process to make it look like a real nice shoe.
Right.
Um, and then I sent it out into the world. We found people through Facebook
Uh-huh.
ads essentially
Yeah.
to join our study. We called it a beta
Right.
test because we weren't. This is
Sure.
going to be a product test. It wasn't going to be research. And we sent them out. 14 people ended up completing our beta test, which was between 1 and 6 months, depending on how long they wanted to use it, with people walking at least 10 minutes a day in the shoes for at
Okay.
least 5 days a week. That was what we told
Sure.
people. And walking
Gosh, I
them,
wish I would have known you. I would have done it.
we jumped in. So we
Yeah,
had
for
people with
sure.
MS. So we had people with
Right.
MS. We had people with stroke.
Hmm.
We had people with Parkinson's. We had people
Right.
with cerebral palsy. We had peripheral
Hmm.
neuropathy. We had people that
Right.
were just older and having trouble
Hmm.
moving their foot forward. And we were just
Absolutely.
trying. I mean, the number one point of that test was to try to assess safety. They had never been released into the world before. We're sending
Right.
them out into the world. And I closely oversaw that. So I would meet with the person beforehand to determine whether or not I thought they were going to be a good fit, explain to
Hmm.
them the risks of what they were doing, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Get the shoes on them, watch them walk, make sure they feel
Right.
comfortable, check in with them after a week, make sure everything's
Hmm.
good, record things. We were doing speed tests too. They were doing it
Right.
independently. Some of these we were shipping
Hmm.
away, and they were telling me, what's going on with their speed. But really, I was just looking for, are we okay? I'd ask
Right.
any adverse events.
Right.
Are you okay? Have you ever felt insecure? And that was my call. So I check
Hmm.
in with a week and then a month and then every month after that to see what's going
Right.
on. And we found that, across the board there weren't any problems, which was the number one relief of all of
Yeah.
that. I wanted to make sure that we weren't going to
Which
hurt
is like
anyone. It's
after all that work.
that's like always what you want to assess, right? And it still is
Right.
what keeps me up at night. That's if like
Right.
what keeps me up at night is if somebody uses this and slips, and that would be awful, because that's our purpose here, is
Right.
to do what we were talking about before we started recording,
Exactly.
and empower mobility,
Right.
and help
Exactly.
people. And so
Yes.
anyway, that came back fairly positive. We had some other really great findings with that were internal for stroke patients. So there were improvements and just assessments of how it was for them, which then we could use for website and educating other people. And so things looked pretty good. So we raised some money so that we were able to then afford all of the different sizes. In
Right.
footwear, it's crazy. Like
Right. Oh, for
you think
sure.
about you think about other products I've made. It's like, you
Right.
make one thing and that's it. For
Right.
footwear,
Right.
one thing is 20 sizes to start. And that
Right.
sounds like a lot,
Absolutely.
and it's not a lot. It's 20
Right.
sizes is
Right.
6 sizes for women, and
Right.
then 4 sizes of wide for the women,
Okay.
and then the same for
Right.
men. It's not much. So you only have a
Yeah.
little bit in the bell curve. So
Yeah.
people that started writing to us, we just tooled now to expand to 40 sizes, which again
Okay.
sounds like a
Wow.
lot, and we're still
Yeah.
excluding things.
Right.
Yeah, so we had to raise money to be able to do that. Every
Right.
mold is
Sure.
expensive, and every size is a new
Sure.
mold, and every size is a new upper with a new stitching pattern of how to
Right.
actually stitch everything together. So it
Wow.
becomes very complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
now we're at
there
the
is a
point where
lot
we're
of
shipping.
science
Oh yeah.
for
So
sure.
yeah, so we got through it, and I have a collaborator at UCSB. He and I have
Hmm.
worked together forever on this. His name's Elliot Hawks. He's
Uh-huh.
another robots guy, but he's a soft robot
Hmm.
guy, so he's more
Okay.
material related. And a lot of our shoe comes down to the materials that we've chosen to go
Okay.
into it. Yeah, so I hope that kind of it tells you a
Yeah,
long
no, that's
history of where this
awesome.
came
I
from.
love that. That is,
Yeah,
I think it explains so much of your heart and how the shoe is made and what the purpose is of the shoe. Cause I know, people seeing on Instagram, they're like, oh, that looks kind of cool, but I don't really know. I don't
like
understand,
what
which
is
is the
it?
reason I
Yeah,
wanted you on the
yeah,
podcast so that people could get an understanding. And I've
yeah.
been asked about it so much, and I'm like,
Okay.
I'm interviewing him. Hold on. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited that,
And like
that there's a
to,
deeper,
yeah. And so, I mean, but really it is as simple as possible. All it is when you're using it, if you have trouble or worry about
uh-huh.
flipping the floor when you move your foot forward or scuffing the
Right.
ground, if you do that with a
Yes.
high friction shoe, it grabs
Yeah.
and that's a problem. But
Yeah.
this shoe, it's low friction. It will slide underneath your
Yeah.
body. When you place your weight on it, it's going to return your traction. That's it. And
Yeah.
then you can step off normally. It's a little bit
Right.
of, my dad has Parkinson's. He's been
Uh-huh.
using the shoes ever since we got them shipped out a
Okay.
month ago.
Well,
And so
how
he
good
goes on
does
his
that
walks.
feel that you
It's
can help your
awesome. It's
dad?
awesome. It's
Yeah,
cool.
that's really
Yeah.
cool.
It's really cool. It's really neat.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of our family members, as they start aging too, are gonna hit different
Sure.
types of afflictions that are gonna affect their
Absolutely.
ability.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
It's
great.
just it's
That's great.
such a neat concept, and it's so cool because like you said, there's so many people that can use this.
Yeah.
And of course, like I'm thinking of my clients that have so
Yeah.
many issues and
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
and thinking of like, I can go a long time. I mean, I used to do marathons and now my running is slowed down.
Hmm.
And then I'm walking, my dog, and I'm like, are you kidding? I'm getting this drop foot.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I just need something. And it's like you go in and they've got these braces that are so big and
Yeah.
so cumbersome. And the
Yeah.
ones that would actually help you are never around or covered. And they're hundreds and hundreds or thousands of dollars. And it's like, all right, you do know that most of the patients are on some kind of disability.
Right.
So how would you expect them to
To
afford this
afford.
stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's always been confusing to me going into this, even when I didn't need anything,
Yeah.
to see these patients in these very large things that didn't really help their drop fit or help what they were struggling
Right.
with.
Right.
So
Right.
I loved your idea and what you were doing because I'm like, that's something that people need,
Ah.
not these giant braces. There
Yeah.
are some people who honestly need
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. Of course.
Obviously, they need
Yep.
their devices, they need their AFO.
Hmm.
However, so many of us are in that spot where we need a shoe, we need something like you said to give us that lift, to not
Yeah.
like trip on the curb and trip
Right.
on
Right.
that uneven, ground.
Yeah.
And that's just such a great invention to
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah.
And so what have you, as far as feedback from the different clients, is
Yeah.
it how have you had, like, what has been um the biggest joy? What have you had like the
Oh yeah.
most from what people
Yeah,
have said?
so certainly, going back to our beta test when I was able to follow
Uh,
people, when people would improve a lot, and I'm talking with them weekly, it was awesome to see that, and I felt really good. Since we've started to ship, which has been over a month now, where we're shipping product, which is scary. It's like
yeah,
this is the furthest I've ever gotten in actually shipping
right,
products that was my own.
right.
And then it's like, oh my gosh, we shipped, we had so many purchases before they even got to the port. We had 800 that we had to ship out. So they all
Wow.
get there at once. And so
Yeah,
we get
yeah,
flood back. But it's been really quite interesting. So we've gotten some awesome messages that really keep us going. Because any
yeah.
product, some people are going to say, I don't like it, it's not for me, that kind of
Right,
stuff, and that
right,
makes you feel terrible.
right.
And then you get these ones that are just like, I mean, I had one from somebody with MS, and she'd said her husband has MS, and um, these are, he hadn't been outside in 10 years. He didn't want to
Wow.
walk anymore. And
Right.
with these, he's able to get up and get out. And now
Yeah.
he wants to go and do things again. And
Yeah.
that makes you like, that was like
Oh yeah.
tearjerker, you're
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
my wife's been helping with customer service because we're getting so many inquiries.
Oh,
And
cool.
I'm a
Yeah.
professor. I don't care. I don't have
Right,
any hours a
right,
day.
right.
We only have Johannes is our CEO. We only have him, me. And so I'm like, I need
Oh,
help. And so
yeah.
she's been jumping on and helping with a lot of customer service, but she's like in tears with this. And
Yeah.
then,
Oh,
it goes
I
out to our whole
imagine.
team and everybody's like, oh my
Yeah.
God. And
I
then,
mean, I get my husband, I'm crying. I'm like, they walked today. And so I
yeah,
totally
right. Oh, you know
understand.
exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
It's
so, or
awesome.
they stood in the
It's
shower
cool.
and I'm excited. I'm
Yeah.
calling and crying. So I
Yeah.
totally get it. So what
Yeah.
an amazing feeling that you
Yeah.
created this. And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's helping. It's actually
Yeah.
helping. So
Yeah. So,
what a neat
those are
thing.
and we've had probably, I don't know, 30 to 50 of those. And it kind of like,
Yeah.
it lifts you up when you get that. And so
Yeah.
I actually,
Absolutely.
some of them, that one specifically, I called them and I was just like, thank you so much for that message. That meant a
That's
lot to
awesome.
us. And it was really
Those are
sweet.
one you want to put on the wall. So when like negative
Yeah.
stuff comes, you're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
why we do it.
Exactly, exactly. And
For sure.
the one thing that we're trying really hard to educate people on, because this is a completely new experience. Like nobody has
Sure.
ever had this experience of walking with
Right.
a low friction surface, because we're all attuned to, if you walked on ice, we're all going to clench our muscles. We're going to be
Right.
scared, right? Because you're like, oh
Right.
my God. you have to learn. Some people, we found in our beta test that 30% of the people had to learn and take a week or so to get
Okay.
accustomed and comfortable. After
Interesting.
about a week, everybody in our tests was like, okay, I got it.
Okay.
Now I'm moving. So in fact, the
Yeah.
person that did the best in our beta test, he started the first week. He's like, I'm a little hesitant. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll try this. For him, he had trained for 11 years in a robot,
Uh,
in a exoskeleton, and his
yeah.
gait looked like a robot. I mean, it was like
Yeah. Right.
up,
Right.
over, down, and very slow
Yeah.
and very high ground clearance on swing,
Sure.
to ensure he wasn't going to hit the ground. And
Yeah.
these were completely different. And I'm telling
Yeah.
him, let's walk to a rhythm. And for
Yeah.
him, the best thing that helped him was, let's think like we're walking is dancing. We're going to have a
Yeah.
beautiful rhythmic motion, and we're
Right.
going to think about moving the same speed on the left to the
Right.
right, to the left to the right.
Hmm.
And for him, that started to then blow him
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
we got a $2.3 million grant from the National
Wow.
Institutes of
Good.
Health to do a clinical
Oh, good.
trial. So
Yeah.
we're starting our clinical trial pilot. All of the participants are currently enrolled in this. It's at
Hmm.
Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, which isn't too far
Okay.
away from you. It's in Chicago. um, and they're the number one stroke hospital. So we're starting with
Uh,
stroke there.
mm,
This next year, I'm going to start writing more grants, probably
uh,
to spill more into the MS space.
yeah.
But we're there with a clinical trial, but we used that gentleman's data that was in our study because
Uh,
his improvement was so drastic that we're like,
that's
wow.
so
So
cool.
that's what I think maybe tipped the
Yeah.
scales with the National
Right.
Institutes of Health to allow us to get that grant to do the clinical
Yeah,
trial.
definitely.
So
I mean, I can
anyway,
think of
some
so many
people need,
clients that need that. So it's
yeah,
just,
some
it's
people need
so
time.
cool.
Some people need
Yeah.
time to acclimate. So, the things that we're hearing back,
Yeah.
is just for some people it feels slippery, and they have to be able to. There's steps on our website that we send people as soon as
Right.
they get the shoes on. Here's some training. Here's a tutorial on how to use it, and
Right.
this is what we want you to do. So we tell them to test the
Right.
waters first, which is
Sure.
put your foot in like you're putting it into some water.
Yeah.
Feel the low friction.
Sure.
Now step on it. Feel the
Yeah.
high friction.
Right.
Now do the low friction, try on different surfaces, try to engage that high friction.
Right.
And if people then can get that and feel comfortable, then they'll
Sure.
continue on, they'll progress.
And then your
Yeah.
wife takes the calls when they're like, I don't get it. Help.
Yeah,
So,
help.
right.
Exactly. Exactly. So,
Sure. I'm
yeah.
sure that that is a lot of that. It's that first
Yes.
couple days that they're like, I'm not sure.
Yes.
And so then
Yes.
they get used to it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
for sure.
very, very neat. I love
Yeah.
these. So tell me, I know that we're short on time because you got to race to the other side to teach.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me about like what you're looking forward to in this next like year to,
Sure.
5 years.
Yeah.
What is something that you're like most excited about with the shoe and with
Absolutely.
everything that you're working on?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the next 5 years, this clinical trial will be completed. And
I thought you were
that's,
going to say taking a nap. I
oh
figured
my
like,
God.
yeah.
Oh, I have three children too. One that's a
Oh
baby. The
gosh,
other two,
me too,
yeah.
but mine
Oh,
are older.
I got you. Yeah. So we're doing this, and it's a lot. But
Wow.
no, the clinical trial will be done in 4 years. That's going to be awesome. We're going to be able to see the
Yeah.
data and something that's statistically meaningful. There's some statistical power. We have 50 people that are doing this test. They're walking in the shoes 12 weeks for 12 weeks, and then they're doing AFO training for 12 weeks. And we're looking specifically at what the outcomes are from this shoe. And for that one, we're
Right.
telling people to train at least 30 minutes a day for five
Okay.
days a week. And it doesn't have to
Okay.
be it doesn't have to be at the same time. They can do 15 minutes, take a break if they can't handle it, and then do
Right.
another 50 minutes, 15 minutes. But we're encouraging people 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And then they'll do the same thing
Mhm.
with an AFO.
Right.
And just so that we can have there's a placebo, and then there's
Sure.
intervention. And so we'll be
Yeah.
comparing the same person on both interventions to see what it
Yeah.
did. And we'll have 25 people that start with our shoe, and then 25 people that start with the AFO. So we flip flop
Right.
them so that there's not an order effect here, to see exactly what's happening. But I will be out of the clinical trial to ensure that there's
Uh,
no conflicted data, that everything's
right.
independently
Sure.
done. Um,
That makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
That's
that's going to be
awesome.
super cool. We already have 6 products in
Okay.
addition to the shoe that are starting to come. So that's really
Okay.
exciting too. We have this one. This is a high friction mat. So it effectively,
Okay.
wherever this is located,
Uh-huh.
we'll turn off the low friction. So you'll have,
Okay.
because it'll stick to the bottom of the low friction stuff. So with
Yeah.
that, if people, we've had a couple customers already respond to us like it's hard for them to get out of their chair with it. Um,
Okay.
And I go over in the tutorials how to do that, which is essentially you load your feet first and then stand up.
Right.
So you can do
Yeah.
it for sure. But people that have trouble, we'll give them this mat that'll make it
Sure.
stick anytime you don't want it to
Sure.
slide.
Yeah.
So we'll have these mats available. We're going to have some other products available that will allow just more functionality with the shoes. We're also
Sure.
developing a from the ground up, which we think is the
Uh-huh.
first from the ground up shoe for people with AFOs to use with AFOs.
Oh, I love
So
that. That's
yeah, that's
awesome.
been a huge one
It
it's coming
is.
from the website. So the people are
That's
emailing
awesome.
us and we've
Yeah,
had hundreds of emails
I
about it.
bet. Because
And
that is
so
such an awkward thing to get your
yeah,
shoe with the
yeah,
AFO. It's like,
yep,
this
yep.
isn't working.
Absolutely. So
That's a
we're from the
great.
ground up, the 100% straight for AFOs. The
Yeah.
same variable friction technology that's in our normal shoes, we're going to put in that.
Yeah.
And we found with the AFOs that one of the people that I work with, that was in our beta test, who's a good friend of mine now,
Yeah.
he gave me all his old AFOs. I've been using AFOs and fitting them into shoes and seeing what the
I've
problems
got
are with
5
different
if you want
types.
some. Let me
There
know.
you go. There you go. Yeah, he had a whole bunch
And
of them.
none of them work. So you can have all of them.
Yeah, so
So yeah, that's so smart.
we're doing that. We're going to come out with an app pretty soon
Yeah.
that will allow people to train together, track their steps,
Uh,
track their
oh
movement,
yeah,
and
smart.
train as a group.
Yeah.
So that one's coming within the next year. There's
Okay.
other types of mobility devices I'm
Right.
designing. So it's going to be a
Neat.
whole lot of things.
Yeah.
They're all coming. So we're
Very
super excited for
exciting.
it. Yeah, it's going to be
Yeah,
great.
I'm super excited. Well, with the when this clinical trial is done, how long will
Yeah.
that be? This first
4-year
one?
trial. It's a 4-year
Okay.
trial. However, we're going to have data that we'll present like pilot data in probably in a couple of years. So we'll have
Okay.
like 10 or 20 people that have gone through it
Okay.
in a couple of years. We'll probably present that at a conference or something, but we'll let people know about the results on our website. But we're not actually selling the
Yeah.
shoe as a medical device. We're just selling it as a shoe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with medical
And so
device
they can get it
comes
now. And so is it just a white shoe or are there different colors?
no, we have for women,
I'm
there's
asking for all women.
Yeah, for there's this was a big thing we learned in our beta test was we were giving them men's shoes that looked like men's shoes and they're like, this is too
Yeah.
ugly. So we worked with 2 different shoe designers. We have
Uh,
really pretty shoes now. We've got
uh,
for women, we have black, which is our best
uh,
seller.
yeah, I'm
65% of
sure.
people buy black. And
Sure.
then we have white, which is the second best seller. And then we have
Uh,
like a light blue, which is
uh,
really pretty. And then there's a pink one
uh,
which is nice too. So we have 4
yeah.
colors for women, we have
Yeah.
3 colors for men. We're developing like a super secret color. And
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Well,
yeah,
I
so
know
that
that
one's
I want to
coming.
get some for sure. But I
Awesome.
think it's just I love the concept. I love what you're doing. I definitely
Thank
want
you.
to hear back, not in 4 years. I want to talk
Yeah,
to you sooner than 4 years.
absolutely.
I want to know how it's going. So
Yeah.
I want to keep in touch with you
Yes,
for sure. And
absolutely.
I want to just know like how it's going. And I want to interview you
Perfect.
more to see where you're at because
That'd
I
be
am
great.
so excited about this.
That'd be
And
great.
I just think it's so clever and such a great thing. I love the work that you put into it. And I just think that, I mean, I'm so excited and I love things that, there's things that are ideas and there are things that vary. Obviously, you're an engineer, you're a doctor, and it's, goes into so much work. And I don't think people
Yeah.
get that often,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
much work goes into this. And so I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it so much. And
Oh,
I know
thanks.
so many others, stroke victims and all of us that have, these
Yeah.
issues appreciate it
Yeah.
so, so much.
Oh, thank
So
you. Thank you.
thank you so much. I'm going to let
Yeah.
you race to the other
Okay. Yeah,
side.
I'll go run and
So hold
teach.
on real quick. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience. So stay
Okay.
with me for a second. So guys, I hope that you enjoyed this interview. And again, I'll have the information so you can look to, so don't stop cars or anything like that. I will have the information at the bottom of the podcast so you can look Dr. Tyler up, and you'll be able to find out all this information, website stuff, and so that you can order the shoes if you'd like. So you'll be able to find all that stuff after at the bottom of the show notes. So thank you so much. I will see you
Thank you,
next week.
Kathy.
Have a great week. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much, Dr. Tyler. It was awesome to be with you.
Thank
So
you
I'm
so
going to say
much,
goodbye
Kathy.
to the audience. Have a great week, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Move It or Lose It podcast, where you can again find us every Tuesday and also wherever you like your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. Join us on that. And we can't wait to see you again. We're going to have a lot of exciting guests and working together. And as always, you'll hear us say at the end of every podcast, we are stronger together. So let's do it. Let's become stronger together. Have a great day.